Hello, retail revolutionaries, commerce captains, and tech titans. Welcome to the Rethink Retail podcast. I am your host, Matthew Adam Smith. I am a top retail expert and a top AI leader with Rethink Retail. And I'm thrilled to be here for a discussion on, you guessed it, AI in retail. We're going to come at this from a bit of a different angle, and I'm going to call it a triangle because we have not just a retailer, not just a brand, not just a solution provider, but all three together here to tackle this evolving and exciting topic of retail AI, and specifically some of the exciting evolutions that have been happening as we get into generative and much more recently, agentic AI. We're going to try to piece this together and we're going to try to keep it moving because we have a lot of brilliance here to convey over the airwaves and via video. So just to help set the stage, you can't walk in this industry. You can't go to a trade show, you can't have a conversation, you can't have a meeting without AI coming up. And it's very much in the ether. And we're all a part of this transformation from generative to agentic AI and specifically omnichannel intelligence. Organizations are at different stages, of adoption in this equation, and so the world is overflowing with data, but maybe a little bit short on actionable insight. And we think AI is really the key to that, not just collecting the dots, but critically and increasingly connecting those dots. And so, these questions of how companies manage their data, how they choose the models, which models they choose to go with, and how critically they implement those choices, that has direct implications on cost, on performance, and ultimately, at the end of the day, this is retail. It has everything to do with the ROI at the end of the tunnel, right? So, again, we have a triangular discussion in order for you today that has three leaders at the top of their game who are really sitting in all of those three parts of that ecosystem, helping to guide the future of retail AI. And so, without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce them to you. And so, first up, we have from the retailer corner, I want to introduce Mr. Brad Tucker, who is the Director of Operational Excellence Engineering at Nordstrom. Brad, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you, Matthew.
Brad, I'm going to ask you just blindly here to, in one word, tell me what does retail AI mean to you?
Operational fluency for AI.
Two words. We'll take it. We'll take it, Brad. You are joined from the brand corner by Shashank Kadetotad, who is the Global Senior Director of Enterprise Data Science and AI for Mars. Shashank, welcome. And what does AI mean to you, my friend?
Well, nice to be here, Matthew. Thank you for the introduction. And for me, I'd probably say disruption.
Disruption. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And last but not least, from the solutions corner, we have Debraj Bhattacharya, who is the industry practitioner for retail and CPG from HCLTech. Hello, Debraj. What does retail AI mean to you?
Hey, Matthew, thanks for that introduction. So I would probably think it would be hyper-personalization.
Well, welcome, gentlemen. Three really great answers. I know I sort of dropped that on you, so you're all on your game, and we'll just get into a nice, robust conversation here. I'd like to start with trends that we're seeing, right, shaping the retail and the CPG ecosystem, and without biasing your answers, just again from your different seats, from the retailer seat, Brad from Nordstrom, from the brand seat, Shashank from Mars, and then from the global SI solution seat, Debraj. And we'll start with Brad. What opportunities, what operational focused trends are top of mind for Nordstrom's digital and even in-store strategy right now?
Yeah, I think there's two parts. One, creating more bang for your buck on marketing and supply chain optimization. But the other thing that's really interesting is the day-to-day operational efficiencies and just the improvements and like the tedious tasks and from the engineering and operations teams and even the product and marketing teams, just that efficiency part for just the non-AI data scientists, just the you, me, and anybody else really being able to use those tools to their advantage.
The boring but critical stuff, fair to say?
Yes, yes.
Nice. Shashank, do you agree? You have another spin on this?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, Brad, you've kind of hit the nail on the head. From the CPG end, I would say there are a couple of other interesting areas, right? Debraj mentioned hyper personalization. I also think there's a whole aspect other than just operational efficiency on the product innovation side, right? Product formulation, There's a ton of research that goes into product formulation, and AI has the capacity and capability to drastically reduce the cycle time to that, right? And then there's also the engagement with consumers that we probably couldn't have imagined before, right? From social listening to just engagement that can inform your product innovation cycle. That has really, I think, picked up pace with generative AI.
It's interesting. You guys have you touched on both the consumer facing, the stuff you can see above the waterline, right? And also the critical stuff that has to be true, right? To get things to customer, right? To ensure we're producing and doing retail in an efficient way. Debraj, from the tech seat, what are you seeing your clients adhere to and align to? And where are you seeing them invest, vis-a-vis these trends that Brad and Shashank have mentioned?
Yeah, I guess both of these, I mean, the thing is, both the points that Shashank and Brad mentioned, I think they are spot on. And I would just want to add, I mean, if you were to think the entire gamut of personalization, it can be thought through multiple aspects. And that's where I think some of these clients, they are investing in. As an example, the entire facet of recommender systems, which would be more personalized recommendations using conversational AI. I think that's one area, as an example, we are finding a lot of traction from some of our accounts. And also, I mean, just on the thing is, just to add on to what they said, there would also be the aspect of sustainability, which is also being impacted a lot by AI. So I can mention one example. I mean, we are talking about sustainable packaging with one of the toy manufacturing companies. And the customers for them are typically kids. So the package should be that much lightweight. The composition shouldn't be toxic and so on and so forth. I mean, that kind of adds on to the aspect of sustainability as well. So I think that's another area. I mean, just to add on to, I guess, what both of them said. So I think some of these things, personalization, sustainability, the recommender systems, and of course, supply chain. And across supply chain, we can think of procurement as an example, coming up with contract documents for procurement. That can be aided a lot using generative AI. Or as an example, demand forecasting. I mean, one classic example where I think there's a lot of play that AI can have. So some of these things across operations modules is also the front end modules are being impacted a lot. And we are seeing a lot of traction from some of these
Yeah.
retailers and CPGs for these.
For sure. We opened with a big, fat, broad question, right? And I think we got from all three of you most of the functional use cases for retail AI, which we could probably do entire episodes on every one of them. Maybe to help focus it, all of these have to funnel to the consumer relationship and the consumer buying behavior. So maybe we flip to that. And Shashank, I'll just ask you from the brand manufacturer perspective at Mars, how do you see AI changing specifically how you guys are connecting with consumers, right? And with the obvious caveat that you're going through retailers to do so, right? But maybe from a category perspective, maybe take pet care or snacking or pick another category and answer that.
Yeah, sure. I think obviously we go through our customers. We also have, especially in Mars, we have a small direct to consumer channel. But there's been, I think, a pretty huge impact, right? The expectation of the consumer from the brands has changed, especially I would say in the past 4 to 5 years, right? And that has a lot to do with, being brand conscious and being able to kind of consume stuff, understanding what you're consuming, understanding where it's sourced from. So there's a whole transparency and trust element that I think has definitely picked up. There's also a value beyond price, right? Debraj talked about sustainability. I think that's a big factor and a big ask for most folks in the CPG industry now, where sustainability we know has picked up a lot of momentum worldwide amongst a lot of companies. So there's that. And all of this influences your brand perception, other than the marketing you do. But all these kind of factors play, I think, a big role in aligning with your consumer and understanding your consumer.
Yeah, that's a great jump off point, Brad, to now think about how that manifests, at the retailer level, specifically at Nordstrom's, and maybe your approach to how you're personalizing, right? How you're styling, how you're creating digital experiences with an eye toward your brand partners, as Shank just mentioned, right? Who are trying to show up in a better way, right? And really drive brand loyalty.
Yeah, I really think from the AI driven aspect for this, you've got it's less about creating new things from scratch. I think it's, really optimizing. So like, for Nordstrom, uh, having a lot of already really great tools for the sale, so customized and personalized shopper experience. And now, we can use those to, rather than an actual personalized shopper going, hey, let me look at all this stuff and like, oh, I think that they would like this cute purse. Now it's providing them a bundle of information, and rather than just having to do this manually, you can bring in thousands of recommendations to the personal shopper and go, hey, here's what I want to put up in a style board or in some sort of thing. So it's not creating something new from scratch. It's just the maturity and efficiency is where I'm really seeing a lot of this really improve.
And it feels like, to your point, we're not necessarily building new pieces, but thinking about how pieces work together differently, right, or better. And this makes me think, Debraj, of that sort of is the role of the global systems integrator, right, from a technology perspective, right, is to optimize workflows and softwares and tools. And so, when your brands and your retailers are coming to you guys at HCLTech, how are you thinking about that, right? How to specifically use AI to respond to these shifts in shopper behavior, right?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a great question. So one of the things that we as SIs probably have an advantage on is that we got a huge amount of experience across clients in a similar industry, be it CPG, retail, or food and beverage, and so on. And we are actually getting to see firsthand the challenges which are being faced by some of these companies, which we can bring to, say, as an example, another of our clients. So, the holistic view that kind of helps in a way. Having said that, we also leverage the partnerships that we have. As an example, partnerships with hyperscalers, or let's say partnership with some of these hardware companies, be it Dell or NVIDIA and so on. Or in certain occasions, there are some companies which are very niche in specific areas, say within supply chain or merchandising and so on. And we also bring that partnership to the table with some of our clients. So I think that's where the value that some of these SIs like ourselves can bring to the table. We also, as an example, have something called an Office of AI that we recommend to some of our clients, and it's more of a structured approach, like crawl, walk, run kind of approach. And the way you can set up a AI project or an AI program, that's kind of guided to an extent by some of these structured thought processes. So I think that's where, we would want to aid some of these clients, and in the process help in their overall AI journey as well. So yeah.
Yeah. And I guess a bit of a jump ball follow up, Debraj. There's this looming question over the past
Yeah.
year or more about, particularly on the brands and retailers asking, and I'll just open this up to all you, right? This question of, should we have a chief AI officer, right? Maybe just go one, two, three. Debraj, start with you, and then let's let Brad and Shashank give their answers as well.
I would love to have that, a chief AI officer. Nice sounding name as well. CAIO, probably. Yeah, not bad.
What do you think, Brad, from Nordstrom and retailer perspective?
I I think no. I think the real focus should be not the data scientists and the chief AI officer. It's bringing that skill set up for product owners, business, uh, you know, procurement and buyers. Like that's where if you're bringing them into the AI verse, that's where the real power is. I feel so.
Yeah. And with that many more stakeholders, a lot more, folks to call on, right? If you're a solution, I think. Shashank, what do you think? Chief AI officer or no?
Yeah, I have a bit of a different take, I think, from Brad. I think there's an absolute requirement for a chief AI officer. I think that role, with how quickly AI is evolving, and they probably don't have to be evangelists per se, but I think more grounders of the organization. So if you look at the AI ecosystem now, for for the general public, it's super fast evolving. You have a ton of tools out there, but when you look at it from an enterprise standpoint, I think there's a significant gap, right? And I think that is where the chief AI officer can play a significant role in kind of bridging that gap and in grounding the organization. Otherwise, I have seen organizations, even from past experience, really given to the hype, right? And I think that's where there's this element of reality that needs to be brought into play. Yeah.
Okay. It was 2-1, so we'll circle back in a few months and see see
Yeah.
where that one's trending, guys. Okay, so we talked about trends, we talked about consumer behaviors. Let's just talk about some just basic examples, use cases, like what's actually happening. So Brad, like what are you guys actually using AI for for the customer right now at Nordstrom?
I think it's giving them a lot more choices for recommendations for so not that we're displaying 1,000 options to them, but now the engine and the decisioning for the recommendations has a huge category, a huge encyclopedia of more products that it can choose to display and package. So it's not that like we're going from 10 products to recommend to 5,000. It's that recommendation engine where before it only had like 10 or 12 items to even suggest. The recommendation engine itself has thousands of options to choose from for that individual.
From the brand manufacturer perspective, Mars, like what are you guys actually using? What are the initiatives at play right now, Shashank, that you
Yeah.
create value for the shoppers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, without revealing too much, I mean, we already have stuff that is already in production and play. For example, in the UK, we have launched an avatar of a famous coach, Jose Mourinho, a famous football coach, who's known for his sarcastic commentary. So you can actually go up there and, you know, put in stuff and he'll actually reply exactly how Jose Mourinho would reply. And that's a part of the Snickers ad campaign, just an example. So I think especially for the areas we play in, brand recall is critical, and that's where a lot of our AI is focused. There's obviously something to be said about digital twins and core and the supply side of things. Operationals, I mean, as you can imagine, I don't think we have anything too much at scale right now, but there are definitely initiatives currently at play. And I think broadly, we're trying to also focus on redefining processes, right? So when it comes to, especially with an agentic workflow, the availability of agents, we are currently looking at how we can embed and create workflows with agents playing the central part, right? Albeit very small and very POC driven as of now, but it so far holds a lot of promise. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Debraj, again, from a solutions perspective, Brad and Shashank are talking about things the customer is saying, right?
Yeah.
Serving up recommendations engines, or things to get product to customers, so supply chain decisions, brand recall. Shashank took us through. From your perspective, right? How are you thinking about packaging up your services, right, to stitch together what has to be true on the back end to make that all true?
Just to add on to both of these points, so one is, of course, the recommender system, the entire thing around personalization and stuff, which is, of course, very important, as Shashank like correctly said. The other would be digital twins, which I guess also Shashank alluded to. The digital twin for manufacturing, that becomes very important for CPG companies. And I think with the latest introduction of things like Omniverse from the NVIDIA side of things, I think things have got a tad easier because you can kind of replicate what's going on in the physical world on the digital side of things with minimal impact and minimal risk, and you can kind of play around a lot of things. So aside of that, a couple of other things. One is on the contact center side. The service representatives on the CSR workflow, contact center as a service, as we all know, CCaaS, I mean, that's been prevalent since quite a while now. But I think courtesy AI, we can do a lot of analysis on even the emotion side of things. So what we would call typically, say, a sentiment analysis, we can go over and beyond that. And we can also get to figure what the emotions of the person on the other side are. And accordingly, we can tailor the responses and so on. So that's probably another thing which we are looking. And the last one would be around supply chain visibility, which we can traditionally call a control tower. But then the thing about a control tower is that it just gives you the red flags in terms of where the KPIs would have gone wrong and so on. But you can also add a predictive and prescriptive layer on top of that, which we would typically call a smart control tower. If something has gone wrong in any particular area within supply chain, why it has gone wrong? So some sort of a root cause analysis. And after that, you can also go for a prescription model as though if this has gone wrong, is there an alternate supplier as an example, or an alternate category, and so on and so forth. So having that cognitive layer built on top of a traditional control tower, I think that's where also quite a lot of conversations are happening with our clients. And I guess AI has aided a lot. And we can also add a bit of an agentic flavor on top of that. I mean, it can be more of a bolt on. It need not be like building everything, reinventing the wheel sort of. It can be like sitting on top of an existing layer that you have, and it will just add on in terms of the feature list and make it that much more enriched. So we can have an agentic semi-autonomous or autonomous layer as well. And you can also have a conversational layer, as a matter of fact. Like some of the demand forecasters, they might ask that what has been the average, say as an example, days on hand of SKUA over the past 6 months and all. And in comes the response. So things like those. Yeah. So I think those are some of the things which we are seeing a lot of traction. And I can go on, but probably, that's things that kind of stand at the top of my mind.
Yeah, and I think every
Yeah.
question, just your answers, just open up more questions and just make me feel so good about the ability of this technology as really a holy grail that, to me, feels very much like most of these use cases, most of these applications are about eliminating or reducing uncertainty, right? Shifting from reactive to proactive posture, right?
Okay.
But none of this is true if we can't get it done, like the hard lifting of it, and putting the pieces together. You alluded, Debraj, to my words here, a certain amount of flexibility of how to put software, hardware systems together. But it seems to me, adoption in the retail and brand space, uh, hardware, yes; software, yes; processes, yes; people, antiquated systems, org structure. Like this is a huge opportunity, but getting, from here to there, I think is where a lot of the conversation is. So like maybe Shashank, from the brand manufacturer perspective, when we think about like, how do we get this done? How do we actually make AI adoption happen? Can you talk about any roadblocks you're seeing, how you're addressing them?
Yeah, I live that every day, Matthew. So I can go on about it, but that's a great question, right? And I'd probably start off with data. I think people oversimplify or uh, don't really understand the criticality of having good high quality governed data, right? So something that's findable, accurate, data, both by machines or by humans. So I think I would kind of start off there. That's kind of the base layer, right? Then from the data aspect, secondly, I would say there's a whole mindset cultural aspect that needs to be addressed. I spoke a little bit earlier about giving into the hype cycle, but there's also the whole aspect of understanding the evolution and being able to pinpoint what the right time is to adopt what kind of a change, right? So we're talking about like a massive change here for any organization, and with that, there's obviously the fear of things are moving so fast. We hear AGI 2026. Does that mean am I going to be replaced? Does it mean how are we convincing the rest of the organization that AI is here to help versus AI here is here to replace you, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of that hype cycle that needs to be kind of controlled. And then the third part, I think realistically, is there's a whole upskilling aspect that needs to happen, right? A whole redesigning our processes and what that means, and keeping, when you redesign processes, what parameters do you actually require and that are important as you redesign these processes. So I would say these three aspects are things that I constantly run into, as do my peers and the rest of my team, that we continue to tackle. Yeah.
Great points, all. And I love that your last two are really about people and how people come together and work together. Brad, maybe to flip on the other side, from a tech stack perspective, what are the challenges and opportunities, but hurdles? How do you get around them? Like, what are you seeing there at Nordstrom?
Yeah, no, I was waiting for this for sure. It's a great segue. What I'm really seeing is that you're seeing a lot of teams and a lot of other companies. They're like, well, we've got to build out this thing for the end road. With these new tools we have, what you build today is not going to be at the same maturity level as where you're going to be in a year or two. Some of this is crawl, walk, run type of stuff where it really parallels to like what we saw, in the last 10 years with cloud, right?
Mhm.
So at the beginning of cloud 10 years ago, it was like, all right, we're going to manually build these EC2s and, move servers over and do these very mechanical things. And then we're like, oh, then let's pull in some more integrated pipelines together and use, containerization and Kubernetes and create all these efficiencies and reduce your share the cost with your compute costs with your cloud. And you see a lot of these companies and including all of ours where there's that cloud maturity that we've gone across over the last
Mhm.
10 years. I'm seeing the same things going forward on that, where it's like, hey, yes, we're building our own pipelines and mechanisms to do our AI stuff, but at some point you're gonna go, okay, we've learned enough ourselves. Maybe the next maturity level is working with a partner, a vendor solution to do all that work for us so we can just focus on using the tools instead of having it building and supporting. I see that maturity level repeat itself with this. So
So we're not being thrown into the water cold then. There's some muscle memory, you think. There's enough folks who've seen this movie in a different version of it, maybe, that we've got lessons to apply.
I think if they remind that they need to think about those lessons, they're like, hey, we've done this in another way. Like, let's just rinse and repeat.
And Debraj, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, this is your job, right? This is what you guys do, right?
Well, that's my job, Matt. The thing is, great points from both Shashank and Brad. And just to add on to that, one of the basic challenges which I find out here is that, like, there is many a time an inherent mismatch between business and the end AI application. I mean, AI for the sake of AI, or as a matter of fact, technology for the sake of technology doesn't make sense unless it actually ties in with a very discrete business end goal. Because till the point we have that business end goal in our mind, the ROI wouldn't be that much. The end results would be up for questions and so on. So I think the first point is would be what would be the end functional goal, business goal, or as a matter of fact, any technology goal that we need to achieve out of that AI application. The second would be so many a time there is a lot of risk awareness, and as I say, perfection is the enemy of progress. I mean, that we have seen on the ground because many a time there would be a lot of aversion in terms of having some of these technologies implemented. Let's say the newer ones, agentic and so on. And I think that's where we as a size, we have an integral role to play because we can bring in the partnerships that we have at our end, our expertise and so on. Uh, and we can actually handhold some of our clients to actually traverse that journey. So I think that's the second one which we are seeing. And again, I think the point that Shashank alluded to, there is a lot of fear many times about that thing is AI will lead to loss of jobs and so on. But the way probably I look at it is that uh, AI will lead to creation of new roles. It won't actually lead to loss of jobs, maybe temporarily in the short term, but eventually there will be new roles which will be created. So, I mean, all in all, I would like to say don't fear AI, but embrace AI. I think that should be the mantra for all of our leaders, both on the client side as also on the consulting side or service side. Uh, we should actually make AI our partner in a lot of these business applications and all. And the more we dig deep, I think the more revelations come by in terms of very interesting use cases that we can think of.
That's a great point, Debraj. I love you. I love pointing that out. Where this, I had that same belief where maybe there's a short term gap in this, but there's going to be more opportunities and jobs created from this, not less.
Absolutely, Brad.
Look at some of these other things we've done in the last 10 years with technology. All it's done is freed up our engineers and our product owners and our business owners and our leaders to then produce more at the same rate, or produce more and use those tools. So yeah, I absolutely agree. Like, don't be afraid, because even if let's say it is, I don't think this is the case, but even it is, okay, it's going to take your job away. Well then, but that the AI is going to stay. So why don't you learn it? Why don't you use it, so then you're not one of those people that quote unquote loses their job to AI, which I honestly feel that now with the studies coming out where it's like, no, there's going to be a pretty big increase in jobs long term on this. So
You guys see that episode of the Jon Stewart show where he had on Mark Cuban, and Mark Cuban basically addressed this very question where he said, if your job is saying yes and no all day, your AI might be coming for your job. But if your job has anything to do with strategic or creative thinking, probably not anytime soon. A good friend and colleague of mine, Eric Jokenstaller of Vivaldi Group, a branding agency, has a great analogy about how he's a data scientist by training and has a branding agency, which is encouraging, I think, of art and science, holding hands. Um, but he says that, think of the hospital ecosystem and, think of the orderly, the nurse, the LN, the nurse practitioner, the surgeon, the head of surgery, the administrator. Now imagine every one of those can go up one peg, one rung on the ladder. And so suddenly orderly is nurse, nurse is LN, LN is nurse practitioner, and so on and so forth. So, and while upskilling everyone, it also zooms out and thinks about how to best deploy all those pieces in the most efficient way. Does that feel right to you, Shashank?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was just enjoying the conversation and the commentary from Brad and Debraj and Matt from you. But I completely agree. I think we'll just be solving much more complex problems, right? There are several complex problems that we are nowhere close to in the world, and I think those just became like much more solvable, or at least got a lot more attention, right? And that's where the entire world, I think, is headed. While there may be short-term disruption, but I think in the medium/long term, it's only going to be positive. So it's an exciting future ahead.
Matt, I love the hospital example. The visualization of that is so
It's great,
easy
right?
to.
Again,
Yeah.
Eric Jokenstaller, Vivaldi Group. I take no credit for that. I'm just a messenger. Um, but let's hang on this idea of partnership for a second, right? Because again, we have the triangle represented here. I think you start with the question of like, do I need help? And the answer is yes, right? If you're a brand or retailer, um, you know, everybody falls somewhere on that spectrum of buy, build, partner, but most are at least, even if you're building, that's a form of partnership. So like, and I'll just focus on maybe Brad and Shashank here from the brand and retailer side, like what's most important to you when you're considering, partnering with a global SI or really any provider in this space? Like, what are you looking for in a partner?
I think the biggest question for some of that buy, build, buy is, especially initially, the your product and business partners need to really be driving that, in my opinion, for these short term. Like, hey, here's an example we can like guarantee ROI for enhancing this better quality in the marketing engagements and stuff like that. And then that will then help. And let's work with this partner that's going to deliver that for us for this one small piece or the project or initiative or whatever. And then from there you learn to go, oh man, we can expand this a lot more. And maybe that's when you're building a lot and replicating a lot of those implementations. And then at some point you go, man, there's so much here, we really need to buy a solution to manage the tooling, and so we can keep focusing on the doing.
Yeah. What I heard while you were speaking was this, and tell me if I got it wrong, but it feels to me like there's a growing matrix of stakeholders, and maybe the business owners, right, have a role to play here. You mentioned product, you mentioned engineering, but you mentioned marketing as well, right? Maybe it wasn't the case that during your cloud example before, necessarily your marketing line of business owner, was at the table for these decisions. Does that feel different now? Do you feel like the line of business owners in supply chain and marketing and product and like all the way up and down, the org, do they have a different and a new, sort of vote and role here in AI, maybe, that we haven't seen before.
Without question. Yeah.
Yeah. Shashank?
Yeah, I think great points, Brad. So I think the space has been evolving rather interestingly. Obviously, it's pretty rapid. And, I think traditionally coming from a data science background and currently running an enterprise data science and AI team, the focus used to very much be build, right? And now with how rapidly we see platforms evolving, I think the barrier for entry or the barrier of acceptance of AI is just continuing to lower, right? So with that, I think there's a whole middle ground of blend, right? Like buying something and then customizing it, right? And there is something to be said, obviously, to organizational complexity and context that needs to really be thought about. And they are in small things, like we have immensely complex processes. Now it's easy to say, hey, let's reimagine those, but they themselves are pretty big exercises. So I think what the way we are approaching it is like a medium term versus a long term. So for the short medium term, there's an approach of buy and blend, right? For a long term approach, there is a process redesign aspect. So to that end, right, what we expect from our partners, and as we go around picking partners, is I think a couple of things. One is like a strategic understanding of the organization and where the organization is headed, right? So obviously a more industry outside and kind of perspective. Then I think secondly, it's how quickly can we implement things. So I think speed is, in any analytics solution, it's all about speed. Obviously, there's accuracy, robustness, and all of that. But I think speed becomes very critical. Uh, and then the third aspect I would say is like enterprise thinking. So I think what we have seen some of our not so successful partners being challenged with, or some of our successful partners doing really well, is to be able to tie in so-called disparate capabilities into like a strategic, well thought out plan, right? Where I think while, as a part of an enterprise team, that's what we primarily look to do. But that's why we count on our partners to actually bring that sort of a thought process, which helps kind of convince the organization to head a certain way, and to kind of bring out that operational tactical plan to move in that strategic direction, right?
Yeah. You guys, again, you gave so much. I mean, from Brad talking about the expanding ecosystem of stakeholders, and, Shashank, strategic, speed, enterprise thinking, which I think is an interesting, reference back to that question we asked is, should there be a chief AI officer? I sometimes think of it in terms of like, you can't bottle this up as a vertical because it is by definition horizontal, right?
Right.
Um, how does this feel to you, Debraj? Does this match what you're hearing from the ecosystem of partners that you guys work with, from the client base? Any disparities from what you're seeing? Or is this pretty much what you're focused on as your North Star for delivering?
No, I think it's pretty much, the points that both Shashank and Brad referred to. I would just want to probably add another thing is that so many a time, I guess, for some of these AI applications, the importance of business or the domain part is many a times kind of understated. We would think that there should be a very good knowledge, and I guess Shashank kind of alluded to that. There should be a very strong awareness of the business domain that each client or each business is in, as a matter of fact. I will give a quick example. There would be the classic CPG companies who would have their distribution models and they would be selling to the retailers and so on. The moment we move from that to a direct to consumer model, the entire dynamics change. There you would have things like personalization directly with the customer. You would have things like last mile delivery coming by and so on. So as against, let's say, we would have traditionally for the traditional CPG model, where probably the middle and first mile of logistics would be important, the selling to stores, the OTIF and all of that would be important. But here we are, where we are essentially an e-commerce company and we are actually delivering to the customers directly. So things like delivery promise optimization, which is the exact precise time at which the delivery can happen, those assume importance here. So the thing is, unless the providers would be absolutely aware of these nuances and changes as to what happens within the overall business landscape, the end AI application cannot also be attuned to that. So I think a very strong awareness on the domain side for the providers is very important. Of course, the technical part, that goes without saying. That's kind of a no-brainer that there should be a very strong technical skill set along with that. But I think is it just another point which I thought to kind of bring up. And probably another quick point would be the partnership, the strength of partnerships that these providers bring to the table. Because many a time there would be a lot of these solutions which will probably be sitting with the hyperscalers or some of these partners. It all boils down to an API or a set of APIs which you can leverage rather than
Sure.
inventing the wheel. And if you can leverage that ecosystem to the max possible extent, I think time to market would reduce, your cost to deployment would go down, and so on and so forth. So probably these couple of points I would want to add, beside what Shashank and Brad already referred to.
It's super helpful, and it's like so as we move from the upside down triangle, right? We're getting towards the bottom here. We started with trends, and we talked about shopping behavior, right? We talked about specific applications, and then how do you partner effectively to make this happen? Um, this is all great talk, right? But it lives and dies by people. So, great place to land the plane here, and sort of two dimensions of people, right? You have leaders, and then you have the talent of tomorrow, and both of those cohorts are facing major questions, right? Or sort of soul searching, you might say. I, I'd love to get the advice from each of your vantage points on how you're thinking at your companies about both of those cohorts, right? How do you make sure your leaders are embracing AI? What advice do you have there? And then how are we making sure that we're creating pathways for the new crop of talent, right, in AI? Brad, let's start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. What I'm really saying is one of the ways that we can really do it is by kind of coming back to that maturity conversation we had, where right now I think a lot of companies are like, "Hey, we have this army of data scientists and you know architects and all this massive data science arm." And an army like that's very expensive and very costly. And I think especially with the agent based generative AI, where I think that's going to be a huge maturity growth for a lot of companies, and where yes, there's always going to be that data insight and machine learning and all that aspect. But for some of this generative AI stuff, the agent based approach, you can move a lot of that agent based logic from a data science organization to having every team own their own agent that then they just it's almost like them keeping and maintaining the documentation repository, the KB articles, as you will, of when you have your agent and it knows to then ask questions for these other agents of peer organizations or peer engineering groups or peer teams. um, that's where you really start to see, I think, a lot of the maturity and cost savings and really growth on how we're using that on the agent based approach.
Yeah. I was at a conference a few weeks ago, and sitting across from, let's say, an HR lead for one of the major global consultancies, who was talking about how they're already being tasked with net zero hiring in 5 years, right? But how they're increasingly looking at bifurcating the talent architecture, right, between human and non-human. Exactly to your point, right? For every human, there's a non-human, and like these questions of how they work together. So that was a very sly way of answering both current leaders and the new crop of talent, Brad. So well done. Shashank, you have to outdo that one.
I don't think I can, but I'll give it a shot. So, uh, I think there's a whole, continuous learning, right? I don't think any industry or company can afford to be uh, stagnant. Like everyone has to be, or every company has to be a learning company now. So I think that embracing that learning mindset for any leader is super critical. I think irrespective of where you are in the organization, but especially if you're a leader, whether you're a functional leader or tech leader, tech, but functional leaders as well. You fully expect them to at least have a systemic understanding of AI, right? If not a technical understanding. I think that's very critical, and being up to keeping yourself up to date. There's obviously also an aspect of, empowering your teams, right? And trusting your teams to kind of carry the torch forward. Because since I think the expertise is no more relegated, so I think we are moving away from an expertise mindset, so to speak, right? Experts, I think, are not going to be as effective as they were previously. And I think that's only going to move more and more towards the whole generalist mindset, given the evolution of AI. So as long as we are able to contextualize that and appropriately use that as a knowledge bank, I think the ability to think critically becomes more and more important. And that's where I think, again, leaders, both leaders as well as your future talent, it's all about learning and it's all about critical thinking moving forward, right? So be curious and learn continuously. Yeah.
This is great, and it seems to me, this is the kind of question where you're asking for two different answers, as if leaders and young folks new to the job are somehow different creatures, right? But you guys both answered in a way that basically said, no, this is going to join everybody together, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's got to be curious. Everybody's got to think critically, right? Everybody's got to lean in.
We're talking table stakes topics here. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, for sure. Debraj, last word from you, though. Maybe on what the leader and the first time, job applicant have in common as it relates to AI skills, implementation, or I don't know. Feel free to be the contrarian here and give an alternate view.
No, I think, the pace at which AI and digital are moving, I think if you're standing static in the present generation, you're actually moving behind. So the entire process of learn, unlearn, relearn, the cycle that we have traditionally known, there's probably no better time to have that implemented on a regular basis than now, because the pace is enormous. And an equally important thing probably would be to building that digital mindset, which probably applies to the new generation folks as much as the more matured folks, because I think AI and all of these journeys, they need an inherent change in the mindset of people who are doing that as well. I mean, the way you would think digital should be an ever encompassing thing across the entire spectrum, across business, across technology, and the way benefits can be brought in using some of these levers. These are at the end of it levers or tools which we are using to achieve an end goal. And I think if we have that overarching view at the back of our mind, things get a lot easier. A lot of fear around AI and all that also subsides, and we can kind of charge full on into this zone, which is kind of a pretty exciting zone at that.
You didn't take the bait. You went with your comrades here. I love it. This has been a great, super, far-reaching discussion, guys. Appreciate everything you contributed. I'll give you one last chance to send us out with a thought. So I'll buy you about 10 seconds as I sort of, sum up what I've heard today, and then ask for your last word. But if I think of, one thing I heard from each of you that really stands out, I'll start with you, Debraj, which is that standing still is losing ground, right? To paraphrase a bit. Um, but I think from Brad, you can't just embrace tech for tech's sake. That makes no sense, right? So Shashank told us to embrace the hype cycle, lean into the change. And what all that does together, I think, and what it means to me is a fundamental shift in mindset, right? And a super exciting one. And it was great to hear from all of you guys from the perspective of a retailer, from a brand, and from a solution provider. And let's just go out on parting thoughts from each of you. If everybody forgets everything and loses this file and never sees this again, what's the one thing you want them to remember? Shashank, let's start with you.
Sure. I think there's this famous quote. I forget who said it. I think it was probably uh, Jack Welch, but it's around, if the rate of change outside your organization is higher than the rate of change inside your organization, you're going to die, right? So I think, I probably paraphrased it a bit, but the spirit, I think, is that, right? I think it's time for change, and it's time to kind of make sure that the organization is ready. And there's a huge mindset and cultural aspect that's a big part of it.
Shashank says, change or die. Brad, what do you say?
Yeah, I think just the daily curiosity is really what I, as a leader, would really focus on and pushing that envelope for. And it can be anything from like, hey, have your AI go and draft a summary email that you're about to send to someone and say, "Hey, I'm." And it's less about the content; it's more about learning how to interact. Say, "Hey, here's the context of the email that I'm going to be sending. Here's the audience. Here's the topics I want to cover," and then it'll do a summary. And you're not gonna send that email out, but it's going to craft something you're like, oh yeah, this is a great approach, this is what I'm going to do. And every day doing even just tiny tasks of like, drafting an email before you actually send it, or do some sort of calendar events, or just simply analyzing stuff like pull the transcript of a presentation and ask it questions of like, hey, what was this presentation all about? Like, it's getting that muscle memory is real. I think is just key. Yeah.
Yeah. What I heard Brad say is it's the drops of water that make the waterfall. And Debraj, you can take us out, my friend.
So I would say, many a time there's a fear of taking risk, but I would say don't fear to take risks because this is such a fast evolving area. You would inherently want to take risk. I mean, I'm talking of organizations, but fail fast, but fail forward. Even if you were to fail, fail it in a manner that you take the right lessons out of that. And in the next AI implementation or any other digital implementation, as a matter of fact, would want to build on some of the learnings that you got from that failure, but never be afraid of failure is probably one thing that should stick to the mind in this current generation of this fast evolving technology and digital landscape.
Well said. No paraphrase needed. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I want to say thanks again specifically to Mr. Brad Tucker from Nordstrom, to Shashank Kadetotad from Mars, and of course, Debraj Bhattacharya from our friends at HCLTech. This has been a real pleasure for me, and I hope it's been super educational for our audience. I know it has been. I want to say thanks to the audience, and thanks for joining us for this edition of the Rethink Retail podcast. We will see you next time.